Now that I've done a brief intro video about Pow Pow World and talked a bit about typings, we can finally get into the most important aspect of this whole project, the Pow Pow designs. And if you haven't seen those videos, in short, I am basically creating my own creature collecting world inspired by my love of Pokemon. Satoshi Tajiri, creator of Pokemon, has mentioned that the Pokemon games and world stem from his childhood hobby of collecting bugs. I think that influence really came through because as I was exposed to Pokemon, it actually motivated me to explore my own outdoors and to observe all the different critters that inhabit it. I really love that aspect of Pokemon, exploring and learning about different species of creatures. There's also just something so nostalgic and leisurely about collecting bugs as a kid. I grew even fonder of bug collecting and fishing because of Animal Crossing. It's funny because now as an adult, I'm actually quite scared of bugs and would never collect them in real life. I felt that the theme of bug collecting was the perfect introduction into this world that I was creating and really captured what I want Pow Pows to be about. So it made sense that my first creature designs for this world should fall under this theme. Originally, I planned on these first few designs being the quote-unquote starters for this world. But because this world isn't Pokemon, I don't feel the need to abide by the traditional grass, fire, and water typings that starters usually have. When I made these designs, my world didn't even have typings yet, since I didn't know if typing is something I want to include. These starters also don't evolve or transform, since at the time I didn't realize I wanted to make a full-on creature collecting world yet. Initially, I thought it was just going to be a small collection of little creatures and then I'd be done. But now that I'm deep in the collectible critter rabbit hole and I've decided to create my own collectible creature world, I will include typings and some sort of evolution or transformation component. But I still like the idea of the starters not evolving and being a single stage creature. I plan to use them as mascots in a similar way that Pikachu is the mascot for Pokemon. And because Pikachu gets so much special attention, Pichu and Raichu are weirdly tossed to the side and forgotten. And I don't want that to happen to any creatures I design. So that's why for the starters of my world, I'd like to keep them as a standalone creature. Plus, it makes things a bit different, which is always a bonus. The first Pow Pow I designed felt so obvious to me. A Pow Pow based on the Hercules/Rhinoceros beetle. They always look like the jewels of any bug collection, and they're actually known to fight each other using their large horns. Beetles are also quite similar to samurais in a way. Both are considerable warriors plated in armor with a large crest on their head. It all fits together so well that it felt like a no-brainer for a Pow Pow design. Kabeetle, the warrior Pow Pow. These bugs are proud warriors. They always fight their enemies head-on with their large horns. They have a very stubborn disposition, but their loyalty is unmatched and unwavering. Because Kabeetle is the warrior Pow Pow, it just makes sense to give it the impact type. On this page, you'll also notice that we have a different color variant. I love the concept of shinies in Pokemon, so I will definitely be implementing some form of it in my world. I'm unsure exactly how yet, but the color variant is definitely here to stay. For my second design, I wanted to do another bug, but one that would be flying. While ladybugs are what I caught the most of as a kid, mosquitoes are the ones that caught me. I tend to have a love for very mischievous characters, and I thought mosquitoes were perfect since they steal blood and are often considered a pest. I wanted to play with the idea of it being a thief since it's always sneakily stealing my blood. I also like how a dishonest thief mosquito would play off the honorable warrior beetle I already had. It felt perfect. To play up its thievish personality, I went ahead and gave him a hokomuri, which is a bandana often worn as a mask by thieves in Japanese animation. But Thiefto will be using it as his furoshiki, a big cloth used to wrap around and carry things, which is also commonly depicted on the stereotypical thief. It keeps all its stolen treasures in this cloth. One thing that always kind of threw me off in Pokemon designs is when a Pokemon has an item. Are they born with it? How did they get it? I'm running into some of the same problems now with my design since I gave Thiefto a cloth. My current idea is that it's actually magically conjured by him, but I don't know yet. I'll have to continue to workshop it. I thought about making it part of his body, but it never sat right with me, and I do like the idea that it's a completely separate item from him. So yeah, I'll continue to think about how it works, but I actually really love his design. He captures the overall style and feel I really want my world to have. Thiefto, the bandit Pow Pow. It is highly skilled in the art of pickpocketing. Using its long nose, it can pick out items from purses and can even pick locks. It keeps all its treasures in its cloth sack, which seems to store way more things than it should. I went ahead and gave it the night type since thievery is a shady activity and mosquitoes are most active at night. For the last Pow Pow of this trio, I was of course still staying in the realm of bugs. Originally, the whole Pow Pow world was going to be inspired by bugs. I quickly axed that since I realized dogs aren't bugs and I love me some dog designs. Anyway, with this bug Pow Pow, I definitely want to be much more abstract about it being a bug. I thought more of how bugs are just little guys that often live in the ground, which is how I came up with this little critter who uses a drill to easily dig into the earth. I also had to think, why would it live in the ground? I came up with the idea that it's very irritable and prefers to be alone, so it digs deep underground and lives there where it can't be bothered. Drillbee, the drill Pow Pow. These grumpy Pow Pows only know digging. They often can't stand being around others, so they use their drills to dig deep underground where they can be left alone. Drillbee of course got the earth typing since, well, Drillbee digs. These are the first Pow Pows I designed, and it was important that they really set a strong example of what I want my Pow Pow designs to have going forward. I feel like they all have a lot of personality, allude to some kind of concept bigger than just being a little creature, all the while being incredibly simple designs. Establishing the Pow Pow look and feel is going to be an ongoing endeavor. As I make more and more designs, I hope to better define the style of my creature designs. While I want this world to be separate from Pokemon, I do want to acknowledge that of course parallels are going to be drawn to Pokemon. Pokemon is such a huge part of my life, and I spent a lot of my childhood drawing those silly little mons. It's also had a big impact on my creative and illustration development, and that will of course show through in my own creature designs. But I also love and am inspired by so many other kinds of art, and I hope to continue to incorporate all those things and better separate and define my style as I continue designing. I guess I'm just trying to say that I'm not intentionally trying to rip off the Pokemon style, but more like Pokemon is also a big part of me and my style. And I'm not ashamed of it at all, but I just wanted to recognize that. Overall, I hope I can manage to bring something new to the table in regards to the collectible creature scene. I'm not super great with my words, so hopefully all that made some sort of sense. I've now introduced you to the first 3 Pow Pows of my creature collecting world. Now, I've been referring to them as quote-unquote starters for my world, and they were originally when I created them. However, for my world, I actually don't want to include the concept of starters. At least not in the form of 3 critters that are handed to you from a professor. I also want to reiterate that Pow Pow World is just a concept. I don't have plans to turn it into a game or anything, so I don't have to worry about how things will work from a gameplay perspective. I really want to just focus on filling out a fictional world to the best of my ability, without any limitations. If anything, I would like to think of the world that I'm building more of a project to be used for an animated series or webcomic. But anyway, back to the starters. In my world, people who collect and raise Pow Pows are called Pow Pow Captains. They're equivalent to Pokemon trainers in a way. I'll talk more about why I chose to call them that in a future video, but for now, well, we'll just go with it. And of course, captains have to start their Pow Pow journey somewhere. Giving them a beginner-friendly Pow Pow makes sense, but I don't love the way it's handled in the Pokemon world. In the Pokemon world, for the most part, it seems that brand new trainers will go to their local professor to receive one of the 3 set starters for that particular region. The 3 starters are always a 3-stage line and are always either grass, fire, or water. I'm not really fond of this as far as world building goes. For one thing, that makes the starter choice so limited for every single trainer. People of an entire region can only select between the same 3 starting Pokemon. It just feels odd, and in the anime, it seems very evident that most characters actually have never even owned one of the 3 traditional starters. I'm glad that most trainers in the anime don't have a starter. It would be so boring to see Charizard over and over and over again. Cynthia, for example, has a pseudo-legendary as her first Pokemon. How lucky is that? But I kinda like that element of luck and rarity. I like the idea that someone's first critter might be super rare, while most others start off with a more common critter. It just adds another layer of interest to getting your first partner. Point is, I think there's great weight in obtaining your first partner creature, so having there be a bit more variety and a bit of rarity involved can create a much more memorable and special moment. I also have other questions and concerns about starters in Pokemon. In the anime, Ash gets Pikachu as his first starter because the first 3 were already chosen. Do they really only give out 3 at a time? They don't seem to refill since Ash was only the 4th trainer that day before they ran out. So when would they have restocked? How often do they even hand out starter Pokemon? Who qualifies for a starter Pokemon? I just have so many questions about this process. That is why for Pow Pow World, I will be handling starters a bit differently. In my world, to become a Pow Pow captain, you must register for a captain passport, which you can do so starting at the age of 12. A captain passport allows you to legally catch and collect Pow Pow, enter official tournaments, and things of that sort. It would also be, of course, your ID. I imagine you can register for one throughout the year, and then everyone would receive their captain passport at around the end of spring the following year. Kind of similar to how college applications and acceptances work in the US. Shortly after passports are distributed, festivals are held at each town to celebrate the recently officialized Pow Pow captains. Each town's festivals will have their own unique quirks, celebrations, and traditions, but there are two major events that take place at each of these festivals. The first being, captains are given their first official Pow Ball, a device that is used to capture and house Pow Pows. Pow Balls are then linked to the captain's passport for documentation purposes. The second and most major part of the festival is an event called the First Catch. Each town has a dedicated nature reserve called a Pow Park. These parks reflect the local town's environments through plants, landscape, and most importantly, through the Pow Pows that inhabit it. The parks are managed and preserved specifically for novice captains, so all the Pow Pows are beginner friendly. Each Pow Park will be unique to each town. Some may have a great variety of Pow Pow, some may have rare ones. It's mainly about having the parks be a sort of reflection of where you grew up and the local Pow Pow that can be found there. Once the First Catch event starts, the novice Pow Pow captains will all be released at once into the Pow Park to obtain their first ever Pow Pow. Captains are only allowed to bring their single Pow Ball and official Pow Bait that is given to captains before entering the park. Other than that, it is up to them to collect their first Pow Pow. Captains can use any method from trapping to even simply befriending a Pow Pow. It is their first test as a Pow Pow captain. I think this method for obtaining your first Pow Pow solves a lot of problems I had with starters in the Pokemon world. With the annual festival, it makes it clear that only once a year are new captains ushered in, and they can all obtain their first Pow Pow at this event. It also makes everyone's first Pow Pow much more unique, since Pow Park would presumably have more than just 3 Pow Pow species, and each town's Pow Park will be a little different from each other, containing a different variety of local Pow Pow. I also like that in this way, you can kind of learn where someone is from based on their first Pow Pow. For instance, in the world of Pokemon, if you are in the same region, you all have the same 3 starter choices. So even if you are from an icy village or a desert town, the starter you have wouldn't really reflect that. The event also has you earn your first Pow Pow rather than having it handed to you, which I think creates a much more memorable and special moment. So I guess in a way, I'm basically saying that there is no species in my world that is a dedicated starter. About any kind of Pow Pow can end up being your beginning Pow Pow. I also want to make a point that I'm not changing things for the sake of trying to make it different. Ideally, everything would be as different as possible from Pokemon, but I'm not going to change something if I don't like it better than what Pokemon is already doing. For example, I like Pokeballs for the most part, a spherical device that captures and houses your creatures. I especially love how in the anime, if you click on it, you can make it bigger or smaller. The fact that it's a ball makes it ideal shape for throwing, and I like that kind of motion associated with trying to capture a creature or to send one out into battle. It just feels right. I spent hours and even days trying to think up alternatives to the Pokeball, but I always end up coming to the conclusion that some kind of ball is the ideal capture and housing device for my world. And even if I were to make a cosmetic change, like changing its shape to a cube or a prism, it would just be for the purpose of making it different, which to me isn't a good enough reason, especially when I prefer the roundness of the ball shape. So for my world, I will have the Pow Ball. I originally drew inspiration from one of my favorite things in the world, Gachapon. Gachapon are basically plastic capsules filled with some kind of toy. You put in some coins into a machine full of these capsules and you get a random one. I absolutely adored these machines as a kid, and the satisfaction of getting just the one you wanted is unmatched. It felt like the perfect inspiration for Pow Pow balls, since it's something that I love from childhood, and it also works perfectly as a device that houses something. I also love its clear nature and how you can always see the toy inside, so you don't even have to take out the prize to appreciate it. So I want the top of the Pow balls to be clear so that you can always see your little buddy. So while making this video, I actually just learned that Pokemon was originally called Capsule Monsters, which means I think Gachapon were also probably the inspiration for Pokeballs as well, which seems kind of obvious now and makes a ton of sense. So I guess I ended up in the same boat again with Pokemon. But it doesn't matter, as long as my decisions are based on things I love and the rationale makes sense to me, then I'm just gonna stick with it. Another thing that I love about Pokeballs is how some trainers use it as part of their accessories. I really like charms for backpacks and phones, so for my world, I imagine most trainers carry their Poweballs this way, having their Poweballs be turned into charms that can easily be attached to their bags and backpacks. But yeah, hopefully that gave you a better insight on how I'm approaching creating my creature collecting world. I am open to suggestions or discussion on anything I presented today. It's always good to get a different perspective and opinion. It's a big reason why I started doing YouTube for this project. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the things I presented to you today, and I hope you look forward to more Pow Pow World content. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.